Welcome, curious minds. My name is Daniel, and this is Flying Chariots: The Rise. Guys, it's 5 minutes to midnight, and I couldn't sleep because my dog farts a lot. So I left the bedroom and went straight to the computer to record an episode. But tonight's episode is going to be a little different. Usually, we explore stories from around the world, we examine eyewitness accounts, scientific discoveries, maybe historical mysteries, but tonight, I want to tell you about something much more personal. Over the years, many of you have asked me the same question. Why are you so interested in UFOs, consciousness, and other strange stuff? The answer isn't a book I once read, or a documentary that changed my mind. The answer is a series of experiences that began almost 30 years ago. Experiences that I still can't fully explain. But before we begin, I want to make something very clear. I'm not here to convince you of anything. I'm not asking you to believe that what I experienced was paranormal or supernatural or extraterrestrial. To this day, I honestly don't know what happened. I really don't. These are simply memories that have stayed with me throughout my life. Maybe there are perfectly ordinary explanations for every single one of them, but perhaps there aren't. I leave that decision entirely up to you. This is simply my story. The first experience happened in 1996. At that time, I was living in a tiny village here in Germany. It was the kind of place where everyone knew everyone else. Quiet streets, open fields, and one clear summer night, the sky filled with more stars than I'd ever seen before. One evening, my girlfriend at that time, one of my closest friends, and I decided to spend the night camping behind the house. We were kids, just 3 teenagers enjoying the warm weather. When darkness finally settled in, we weren't even inside the tent. We were lying on the grass around it, talking about life. Well, we were 16. What did we know about life? Yeah, but we were talking about stuff while staring up at the stars. Everything was perfectly normal. Then after a while, my friend suddenly stood up. He didn't sound frightened or anything. He just pointed towards the sky and calmly said, "Hey, look up there, guys." And at first, neither of us understood what he was looking at. We searched the sky for several seconds and suddenly we all saw it. It wasn't moving, at least not at first. It simply hung there in the sky, completely still. Almost as if someone had painted it into the stars. The object had a triangular shape, although its corners appeared slightly rounded rather than sharp. In the very center was a single light. It wasn't flashing or anything, not blinking like an aircraft. Just one steady point of light. For a few moments, none of us said a word. We were simply trying to understand what we were looking at. Back then this was 1996. There was no YouTube for me, no social media filled with UFO videos. None of us had spent hours reading about mysterious triangles in the sky. To us, it was simply something we had never seen before. And then, something changed. Without any warning whatsoever, the object accelerated. It didn't slowly begin to move. It didn't build up speed. One moment it was perfectly still, and the next, it shot across the sky. Whoosh! Even today, I struggle to describe just how fast it happened. Imagine the length of a football field, covered almost instantly. Not in seconds. It happened in what felt like a fraction of a heartbeat. Then it stopped completely. No wide turn, no gradual deceleration, just stillness. A second later, it moved again, this time in a sharp zigzag pattern. Again, the movement seemed instantaneous. Again, it stopped as abruptly as it had started. The three of us just stared at each other. Nobody tried to explain it, man. We didn't laugh. There was only one emotion left: fear. We were shitting our pants. Yeah, there I said it. We were frightened. We grabbed our things as quickly as we could, ran back into the house, locked every door, and stayed inside for the rest of the night, guys. I never looked back outside. Nobody did. I didn't think something was coming for us, but I simply didn't know what we had witnessed. Looking back now, that night didn't convince me that aliens were visiting Earth. It did something much more important. It shattered the quiet confidence I had as a teenager that I already understood how the world worked. For the first time in my life, I had experienced something that didn't fit into my understanding of reality. And from that moment on, I started asking questions. Questions that nearly 30 years later, I'm still asking today. And guys, for a long time I didn't tell many people about what we had seen that night. Partly because I wasn't sure anyone would believe us, but mostly because I didn't know what to say. How do you describe something you don't understand yourself? All three of us had witnessed the same event. None of us had been drinking. Well, not that night. None of us had expected to see anything unusual. It simply happened. Life went on. School, work. The ordinary rhythm of everyday life slowly pushed that night further into the background. But for me at least, it never disappeared completely. Every now and then, I'd remember that object hanging motionless above us. The impossible acceleration, the sudden stop, and I'd find myself asking the same question all over again. What did we actually see? Over the years, I started reading books. I watched documentaries, followed news reports whenever they appeared. I wasn't searching for confirmation, I think, but I hoped that one day I'd come across something that matched what the three of us had witnessed. Sometimes I thought I had. And guys, I can't stress it enough, I said it before that summer night I assumed the world worked exactly the way I believed it did. Afterward, I became comfortable saying three simple words: I don't know. As strange as it may sound, those three words became incredibly important to me. Because once you accepted that you don't have all the answers, you become much more open to asking better questions. The years passed, the memory remained, and then something happened that had nothing to do with lights in the sky. It happened inside my house, and to this day, I'm still not entirely sure whether I experienced it or whether my own mind somehow created it. It was strange. So the next experience didn't happen until many years later. By then I was an adult. Life had changed. I had started creating podcasts already about the mysteries that fascinated me. On one particular night, I had just finished recording an episode. It was late already. The house was completely quiet. I left my desk and walked into the kitchen to get a glass of water before going to bed. Nothing felt different from any other night. I filled my glass, took a drink, and started walking back towards the staircase. As I stepped into the hallway, something caught my attention. At first, I thought it was simply a shadow. Our eyes sometimes can play strange tricks in dim light, right? So I stood there for a moment and looked more carefully. The longer I looked, the more it seemed to take shape. It looked like the silhouette of a tall man standing perfectly still in the hallway. I couldn't make out the face. I couldn't make out clothing or any other details. Just a dark, human-like outline. But what really frightened me wasn't what I saw. It was the feeling that came with it. It's a little bit different for me to describe. There was no sound, there wasn't any movement, yet every instinct I had told me not to stay there. So I took off. I turned around immediately, walked upstairs much faster than I normally would have, and got into bed. And I do remember thinking that I'd probably laugh about it in the morning. Perhaps my imagination had simply gotten the better of me after spending hours talking about mysterious subjects. Then something happened that I still struggle to explain. The moment my back touched the mattress, I felt a powerful jolt. It wasn't like waking from a normal dream. It felt as though someone had pulled me violently back into my own body. And then suddenly I was sitting upright in bed, completely confused. Man, was I confused. And for a few minutes I couldn't understand what had just happened. Had I actually walked upstairs only seconds ago? Or had I already been asleep much longer than I realized? Little by little, another possibility began to emerge. I had the strange feeling that I hadn't just gone upstairs. I had already been asleep. Everything that happened after leaving the kitchen, the hallway, the shadow, even walking back to bed, may have happened somewhere between dreaming and waking. Guys, even today I honestly don't know which explanation is correct. Was it an unusually vivid dream, a false awakening, whatever that is, or something else entirely? I have no fucking idea. What I do know is that it felt absolutely real. As real as speaking to you is right now. And that feeling stayed with me for a very long time. Now, several years passed before I experienced anything unusual again. But then, my curiosity had expanded beyond UFOs. I had become fascinated by another mystery, out-of-body experiences. I'd read countless accounts from people who claimed they had left their physical bodies, which felt very strange to me, but very interesting though. Some described floating above their beds, others spoke of places that felt more real than dreams. Man, I was fascinated, but also skeptical, and I'm still skeptical today. I wanted to know whether such an experience was even possible. So for quite some time I experimented with binaural beats. Night after night I listened to different recordings before falling asleep. But nothing happened. Weeks passed. Eventually I almost gave up trying. Then one night something was a little bit different. I was lying in bed, just beginning to fall asleep, when I felt a strange vibration spreading through my body. It was just as the books and the witness accounts described. At first it was subtle, then it became stronger. I didn't feel any pain or something, but it was unlike anything I had ever experienced before. It felt as though every part of my body was vibrating at the same time. And then the sensation frightened me, like really frightened me. Without really thinking about it, I resisted it. Almost immediately, the vibration disappeared. And I felt relieved. The next morning, I convinced myself that I had probably imagined the whole thing. Perhaps I had simply drifted into a strange dream or something. But a night, or maybe 2 nights later, it happened again. The same vibration, the same strange sensation. This time, I made a different decision. Instead of fighting it, I simply let it happen. I told myself, "Come on, Daniel, you fucktard. Let it happen." So the vibration became stronger and stronger. I reached a point where I honestly thought my entire body was shaking. And then, without any transition that I can remember at least, everything changed. I no longer had the feeling of lying in my bed. Instead, I felt completely weightless. I wish I could feel that right now. As though I were floating in an enormous, empty space. There were no walls, no ceiling, no floor. There was only darkness, just like in space or something. And an overwhelming sense of freedom, guys. Yeah, it felt good. For a few moments, I simply existed there. But then, suddenly, fear took over again. There was a single thought that entered my mind. What if I can't get back? The instant I had that thought, I was back. I opened my eyes, I saw my wife sleeping beside me, our dogs were exactly where they always slept, the television was still on in the background, everything looked completely normal. I remember feeling an incredible sense of relief. At least I was home, and I was safe. As my heartbeat slowly returned to normal, because my heart was racing, I relaxed. And something happened that surprised me even more. Without effort, without the vibration starting again, I slipped straight back into that strange place wherever it was, or whatever it was. This time, I wasn't afraid. There was no hesitation. It happened almost instantly. One moment I was fully aware of my bedroom, the next I was somewhere else again. Or perhaps in some other state of consciousness. I don't know. I'm not an expert. I honestly don't know which description is more accurate. Once again, I found myself suspended in what felt like an endless dark space, which was cool. There was no up, no down, there wasn't a horizon, there was just silence. An absolute silence unlike anything I've ever experienced before, or since. Then I noticed something in the distance. It wasn't approaching me, it simply existed. The best way I can describe it is as a giant diamond-shaped structure. It appeared to be suspended upside down, balanced effortlessly in the darkness. Its surface shimmered with colors that seemed almost alive. Most of all, I remember the purple. And guys, it wasn't an ordinary purple. It was, it was deeper, brighter, more vivid than any color I've ever seen in everyday life. Even now, a long time later, I will still struggle to find words that truly describe it. So, the structure didn't speak or anything, it didn't move, it didn't seem threatening in any way. I simply looked at it, completely overwhelmed by its beauty. It was one of the most peaceful moments I have ever experienced, guys. There was no fear anymore, no questions, no urge to understand what I was seeing. For those few moments, it was enough just to be there. But eventually, the experience faded. I found myself back in bed once again, wide awake. My heart wasn't racing. I wasn't frightened. Mostly I was confused, because I had no framework that allowed me to explain what had just happened. Was it an extraordinary vivid dream, or a lucid dream as people call it? Or was it an out-of-body experience? Or simply something my brain created while moving between different stages of sleep? I don't know. I really don't know. Even today I don't know. And honestly, I'm comfortable admitting that. Not every experience comes with an explanation. That I know now. But guys, that's not the end of the story. A few days later it happened again. And some of you might say now, this guy tells us all these stories and he's a storyteller. It never happened. I can't force you to believe what I'm telling you. But I swear on my dog's farts, this happened. This happened. Like I said, this almost, not the same thing, almost the same thing happened again. By then, I recognized the feeling almost immediately. The vibration returned, but this time, it felt a little bit off. The energy didn't feel peaceful anymore. It felt heavier, more intense. I don't know why. It almost felt aggressive. The vibration felt aggressive. I felt it on my face and it didn't feel good on my face. But nothing actually happened that could be described as threatening. It was simply a feeling. And it stayed with me throughout the experience. Once again, the vibration grew stronger. And once again, I felt myself leaving the familiar world behind. This time, however, I wasn't floating in complete darkness. I was moving fast. The closest comparison I can make is Superman flying. I wasn't walking, I wasn't falling through a tunnel or something. I was simply gliding effortlessly through what felt like an endless open space. Then I became aware of something unusual. It felt as though someone was sitting on my back. I know it sounds funny, but that's what I felt. Someone was clinging to my back. I never saw who or what it was, but strangely enough, the presence didn't feel unfamiliar. It almost felt, comforting, as though whoever it was had been with me the entire journey. Eventually, we arrived at what looked like an ordinary house. Lights were on inside, there were people everywhere. The atmosphere felt warm, welcoming. Without hesitation, I walked inside. People spoke to me, we had conversations. Unfortunately, I can't remember what we were talking about. Only the feeling remained. Everything seemed completely natural, as though I belonged there. Then my unseen companion spoke for the first time. He told me he needed to leave. He said he wasn't feeling all too good. So there was something almost human about the moment. Just, someone quietly saying goodbye. And then he was gone. What happened next has stayed with me ever since. The people inside the house hadn't changed. They didn't become aggressive or anything like that. Nobody threatened me, nobody asked me to leave immediately. But something had shifted. They looked at me differently. It was subtle, almost impossible to describe. Suddenly, I had the overwhelming feeling that I didn't belong there anymore. That I was somehow out of place, an outsider. The warm atmosphere had vanished. And it wasn't because anyone had done something, but because I simply knew it was time for me to leave. Maybe it had something to do with the guy on my back that left. I don't know. And just as suddenly as the experience had begun, it ended. I opened my eyes and found myself back on my own bed. The room was silent, everything looked exactly as it always had. Yet, I lay there for a very long time, trying to understand what just had happened. I never found an answer. Those experiences happened a good while ago. Since then, I never had anything quite like them again. And strangely enough, yeah, I'm okay with that. For a long time, I searched for answers. Looked at books again, listened to interviews, had interviews myself, explored different theories about consciousness, dreams, near-death experiences, and the nature of reality itself. Some explanations sounded convincing, others not so much. But eventually, I realized something very, very important. I don't actually need an answer. What happened, happened. Whether those moments were unusual neurological events or exceptionally vivid dreams, out-of-body experiences, or something that science simply doesn't understand yet, I don't know. I honestly can't tell you. And I don't pretend that I can. One thing, however, has stayed with me ever since. All those experiences happened during one very specific period of my life. And I think that's important to mention. I had been injured and was away from work for quite some time. I had a pretty bad back injury. For the first time in many years, my mind was almost completely quiet. There was no stress, no deadlines, no pressure. I spent my days reading, chilling, thinking, walking, simply existing. Perhaps that was just a coincidence, or perhaps our minds behave differently when we finally stop filling every walking moment with a noise. I honestly don't know. I can stress it enough, guys. I honestly don't know. Looking back though, none of these experiences convinced me that I had discovered the truth about the universe. No. They convinced me of something much simpler. That reality may be far more mysterious than we often assume. We like to believe we figured everything out. That if something can't be measured today, it probably doesn't exist. History has taught us that this way of thinking rarely ages well. Every generation believes it understands the world, until the next discovery proves otherwise. Maybe all of my experiences will one day have perfectly ordinary explanations. Who knows? I genuinely hope they do, because understanding something doesn't make it any less fascinating. But until the day comes, I'll continue doing what I've always done. I'll keep asking questions, and I'll keep listening to other people's stories, because I love them. And I'll keep exploring the possibility that our universe is far stranger and far more beautiful than we currently understand. Thank you for listening. And thank you for allowing me to share something so personal with you, whether you believe it or not. I hope this episode reminds you to stay curious, because sometimes the greatest mysteries aren't the ones we solve. They're the ones that quietly change who we become. Until next time, take care of yourselves and keep looking up.